Duilio Cambellotti was born in Rome in 1876, the son of a woodcarver, and despite his early affinity for visual art, he initially studied accountancy. But he realised the error of his ways and subsequently enrolled at the Academy of Fine Arts in Rome. And in addition to his studies, he also travelled widely around the Mediterranean and Aegean seas at this time, and undoubtedly absorbed influences from the traditional art and artefacts he encountered. The earliest examples of his work appeared in the later 1890s, by which point he was still only in his early 20s, and the sophistication of the Art Nouveau, or more properly in Italian, stile liberty, images he created, showed an already mature talent. Many but not all of his commissions at this time were for posters, and they demonstrated he was adept with the combination of hand lettering and imagery, which the best examples of this avenue of expression demanded. There is also evidence that he attempted to diversify with some less inspiring, rather stiffly executed political cartoons for an unknown publication in 1900, an attempt he appears to have given up on soon after. Most significantly for his early career, in 1901 he worked on an illustrated edition of Dante's Divine Comedy, which was published a year later. And this commission was obviously far better suited to his natural talents. The striking and suitably dark brooding sepia-toned images he produced to illustrate the text won a prestigious illustration prize in that year, and their success went a long way to establishing his reputation for the creation of compelling neoclassical imagery. He was a particularly restless, creative individual, and in addition to his developing reputation as an illustrator, Cambellotti also gained early recognition for the quality of his ceramic work. But it was his work for print which remained dominant at this time, and he continued to be productive in the creation of more posters, occasional magazine commissions and book cover design, with which he developed his already pronounced aesthetic abilities. In 1907 he was one of several illustrators invited to record their impressions of the Targa Fiore, an early motor racing event for which he created a range of particularly expressive and expressionistic images rendered in both monochrome and colour. Among his magazine clients was Novissima, an arts journal for which he created cover designs, and he continued to create posters which by this point were evidently moving progressively away from his earlier more elaborate stile liberty designs, in favour of harder-edged, more formal graphic execution. In 1911 he illustrated the book Animals of the Forest and Sea, using his facility for woodcuts to create descriptive but stylised imagery featuring all manner of creatures. And in a rush of creative activity, the same year also saw the publication of another two books with similarly styled brutalist illustrations. Fausto Salvatore's Canzoni Civili, a collection of social and politically themed song lyrics, featured starkly dramatic images printed in brown on cream paper stock to illuminate each one. Cambellotti placed his images within a framed square format, and he continued to favour this form of presentation for much of his work during the rest of his career. The second publication of this year was another Salvatore book, La Furia Dormente, an epic poetic tragedy, which used a similar basic palette with equally striking results. And both books were a clear demonstration of his expressive narrative prowess, working in this notoriously demanding medium. A year later he completed what is rightly recognised as one of his greatest illustrative achievements. This was an extensive series of portrait-formatted full-colour narrative images rendered in ink and generally flat tempera paint for the stories of the 1001 Arabian Knights. They were all graphically stylised in their execution, but as with virtually all his work, his prowess with credible anatomy in both humans and animals was well to the fore, and each image highlighted the narrative with great success. Whether this tall format, which can't have made their compositional creation easy, was imposed on him, or it was his own decision, the evidence indicates that he more than rose to the challenge it presented. In addition to his manifest and diverse talents as an illustrator, Cambellotti also had considerable success as a designer of modernist furniture, and in that capacity had obviously inherited an understanding of how to create synthesized beauty from wood from his father. He also became fascinated by and adept at the design of stained glass, and in 1912 he successfully exhibited examples in this medium, along with that of several of his contemporaries. And among his achievements in stained glass design, he created 10 highly decorative nature-themed examples between 1914 and 1918, which were incorporated into the windows of the delightfully eccentric building known as the House of the Owls, situated on the estate of the Villa Torlonia in Rome. But even these various accomplishments were far from the full extent of his creativity. And very much a modern-day Renaissance man, Cambellotti also had a thriving career as an artist, creating and selling limited edition prints and paintings, as well as a large volume of particularly dynamic sculptures, many of which were equestrian-themed. And he would continue to work on all manner of artistic projects, with critical and popular success up to his eventual death. In 1920 there were 2 more books published featuring Cambellotti's woodcut illustrations. La Siepe di Smeraldo by Ettore Cozzani was a contemporary novel which detailed the lives of a small Italian farming community, and in this instance some of the illustrations were reproduced in black and others were reproduced in a deep green. All of them were constrained to Cambellotti's favoured square framing, and as woodcuts quite minimalist in their execution to one degree or another. Nevertheless, despite the limitations inherent in this form of image creation, they managed to be emotionally stirring and occasionally disturbing. The second of that year was the Fables of Trilussa, the pen name of Carlo Salustri, which were originally published in 1901. These were not a reimagined version of the more famous fables of Aesop, but were all based on one aspect or another of specifically Roman folk tales. And the stylized full-colour tempera painted illustrations he produced to accompany the fables were particularly engrossing, despite their formal composition and general lack of suggested animation. This was in itself an extensive commission, and in addition to the colour images he produced, there was also a large series of equally compelling woodcut monochromes, employing similarly formal layouts, which featured equally convincing if generally static evocations of the various creatures, none of which featured any anthropomorphic characteristics. 1920 also saw the cover design and more narrative page woodcuts for La Vanguetta del Fante, which translates as The Infantryman's Spade, a novel set during the First World War written by Giuseppe Zucca. And Cambellotti returned to the proven visual success of woodcuts printed in brown ink on cream paper, set within the square format he generally preferred. Despite this meaningful body of illustrations, he continued to also find time for his other pursuits, with the abundant production of yet more ceramics, sculpture and furniture, all of which lends weight to the idea that, like many I've featured in this series, Cambellotti didn't seem to feel the need for sleep, given the level of his productivity. It was in the early years of the 1920s that he began creating posters for dramatic productions by the Greek Theatre of Syracuse. Each of these was created with flat traditional lithographic colour from his tempera painted originals, and his penchant for formal, frequently profile presentation of characters suited these posters particularly well, given the mannered nature of these ancient dramas. And this would be an association which endured for the best part of 2 decades. In addition to the posters, he was also involved in stage design for these and other theatrical productions, creating drawings and models which were astonishingly sparse and modern in their visualization. In 1926 he created a limited edition of 1,000 copies of The Little Flowers of St. Francis of Assisi, originally written in the 14th century, and now brought to visual life with some fine evocative tempera painted illustrations depicting key moments in this saint's life. In 1928 he created this compelling book cover for the work of the ancient Roman playwright Plautus, originally written around 200 BC. And at this time he continued to create more posters for various events, including more for the productions of the Greek Theatre in Syracuse. and it seems that by this time the stained glass work he was designing had gravitated from secular to religious subject matter for church windows, including a particularly impressive design for the Catholic Church in Jerusalem. This collection of brooding monochrome scenic drawings dates from 1928, but I can't tell you with any certainty what they were created for. As they were not rendered in colour, they may well have been concept art for an Italian film of the period, and they certainly look the part. But I stress this is just a guess. In the 1930s, it seems he was swept up in the general adoration of the dictator Benito Mussolini and created some spectacular mural work, some of which was in praise of the many engineering achievements which Il Duce had instigated, and most significantly some which made Mussolini the heroic focus of the images, possessed of positively religious fervour for the government palace in Ragusa, Sicily. These monumental works must have taken up much of his time and energy, assuming he actually painted the panels himself, and yet there was no letting up in other creative activity. And in 1932 he also produced a large series of attractive flat colour images inspired by the Palio of Siena, a horse racing event held in the Piazza del Campo, dating back to the 17th century. The text was by Piero Mischiatelli, and Cambellotti's illustrations were created as colour woodblock images of considerable dexterity and aesthetic appeal. To create this large and technically demanding volume of images, he had actually been resident in Siena for the previous 2 years in order to work from observation of the event and costumes, so heaven knows how he had managed to be involved with the Mussolini triptych in Sicily at the same time. Throughout the 1930s he continued to be as startling prolific as he had been in the previous decade, and in 1937 the book Roman Legends, written by Ettore Cozzani, was published. And the text had clearly inspired the production of yet more dramatically evocative woodcuts from Cambellotti, very obviously in his element with this subject matter. It was no coincidence that the Mussolini regime was modelled very much on that of ancient Rome, and images such as these were guaranteed to resonate with most Italians of the time. He was still active as a poster designer for a variety of outcomes, including other theatrical productions. And among others from this time, he also created this poster for the film Il Condottiere, for which I also found the original sketch, showing how little was left to chance in the artwork. In 1939 he designed what appears to have been the last of his posters for the Greek theatre, and during the years of the Second World War there are very few examples of his work to be found. And what little I could find consisted of this striking poster for another historical film and some costume designs for theatrical productions, yet another aspect of his diverse creative output. And even after the war had ended, evidence of his work became noticeably less in quantity, even if the quality remained every bit as high as previously. I did find a couple of pieces from this period for which I can't trace a specific outcome, and among other commissions in 1948 he created 2 alternative and more than usually painterly designs for the Roman epic film Fabiola. And the only other evidence of commercial work I found was this more typical poster advertising the supposed restorative effects of the waters of Cianciano from 1950. But it's recorded that he was still designing stained glass in the later years of the decade. And Duilio Cambellotti died in Rome in 1960 at the age of 84. There have been several others featured so far in this series who also demonstrated versatility across a wide range of creative activities, but I can't think of one who rivals Duilio Cambellotti in that regard. It makes a very pleasant change to be able to report that his country of birth thinks enough of him to have dedicated a museum to his life and work just 40 or so miles out of Rome centre. As I indicated in the introduction, Cambellotti created many images I can't be definitive about, but they're all worthy additions to his remarkable body of work, and here are some I find particularly noteworthy to play us out.